I went to a famous school in New York City called the Juilliard School of Music. I have a bachelor's and a master's. I practiced 10 hours a day. I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but I literally sat every day at the piano for 10 hours, and look what it did to me. I see some other people that practice 10 hours a day out there. There's a guy. Yep. I see you're raising your hand. Yeah. And I'm going to play the music. I'm going to introduce the pieces. You're going to know what I'm going to be playing. I think if you know a little bit about the music, you can enjoy it more. And then I'm going to share my testimony. Music's not the most important thing in my life, but Jesus Christ is. I came to know him 54 years ago while I was a student at Juilliard. Juilliard is not a Christian school, but I met Jesus at Juilliard. So that was the greatest moment of my life. Greatest moment of my life. So, the first piece I'm going to play is by my favorite composer, Beethoven. So Beethoven is the only composer that every note he wrote is still being played today. No one else is like that. Some people, composers who are famous, wrote 200 pieces, 40 of them are played. Now, the 40 pieces are phenomenal, but there's 160 pieces that you'll never hear about them, but not Beethoven. He never wrote 1 second of mediocrity or background music, but it was the power of the human heart. This is an early piece by Beethoven. So early Beethoven is Beethoven grabbing your throat. Very dramatic, very intense. He really changed the course of music because nobody could imagine that music had this kind of power and influence of the emotions. And so the first part is lively. The second part is slow. The second movement, I think you may recognize. It's one of the most beautiful pieces Beethoven wrote. The third part is a little dance, and the fourth part is very fast. So this early work takes about 15, 16 minutes by Beethoven. Thank you. Wow, you're enthusiastic. Wow. Thank you. Well, next I'm going to play you two pieces by the famous composer Frédéric Chopin. So Chopin was Polish, and the unique thing about Chopin is that he's the only composer who wrote just for the piano. So Beethoven wrote for orchestra, he wrote for violin sonatas. I've played a number of the pieces for violin and piano. He composed for cello, for voice, but Chopin just wrote 99.9% of his music was for just the piano. So if you're ever going to play the piano, you better like Chopin. I've never met a pianist that didn't like Chopin. So Chopin, as I said, was Polish, and Poland was trying to get their independence from Prussia, not Russia, but Prussia. The Prussians were a part of Germany, a Germanic empire, and Chopin wanted to encourage the Polish people, so he wrote these two pieces called The Tragic and the Military Polonaise. So, the tragic, meaning it was sad, the people are suffering, they're struggling for their independence, and then to rally them up, he wrote this piece called The Military. It's more nationalistic, but it's very exuberant. It's one of the most famous pieces Chopin ever wrote, The Military Polonaise. When Chopin was going to write this piece, he wrote them actually within 24 hours of each other. He wrote one on one day, and the next morning he wrote the second piece. And when he gave it to his publisher, when you publish music, it's called an opus numbering system. The word opus, O-P-U-S, is a Latin word which means work. So if a composer publishes opus 100, and he also has opus 40, you know there's a lot of 60 pieces in between 40 and 100, and a lot of time. So Chopin, when he gave it to his publisher, he said he wanted them, they were written together, they're meant to be played together, and he wanted them published together. So this is opus 40 number 1 and number 2. Not opus 40 and opus 41. You see, not separate numbers, but the same number, but 1 and 2. So it shows the connection of these pieces. Now, a Polonaise is a national dance of Poland. I've seen it perform. I've been to Poland. In fact, I was in Poland last May. And it has a unique rhythm. It's sort of like, let me say this. What square dancing is to America, Polonaise is to Polish people. You understand? It's very much ingrained of the culture in that sense. So it has a unique rhythm. The rhythm goes like this. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. And you'll hear it somewhat in the first one, but you'll hear it more very obviously in the second one. Also in the second one, you'll hear a drum roll. So this was, again, the imagery of the struggle and for the victory of their independence as the Polish people. So this is the Tragic and the Military Polonaise by Chopin. Thank you. In October, I turned 75, and playing that piece is like a 2-hour workout in the gym. It's brutal. It was much easier when I was 55 to play that piece. Well, next I'm going to play you two pieces that I call my gems. Now, when during COVID hit, I had 54 concerts that were postponed for 1 year. And I made up 49 of them out of the 54. So I had a lot of time to practice because I had no concerts for 7 months. And then I started again in October, middle of October, from the middle of March to the middle of October. And so I found these two pieces. And I call them my gems just because gems is not in the title, but I think they're really special. I never knew these pieces existed. The first piece is called The Music Box. It's written by a Russian composer named Lyadov. He's not as famous as Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky, but he wrote some wonderful pieces. And it sounds just like a music box. Now, you know, a music box is a little thing, you know, and it has a little tinky sound, you know. And there's a little ballerina on the top, and she goes around. Right? Yeah, I'm going to do it again. You can't trick me, buddy boy. Oh, no. So, and you know what happens at the end of the music box? It unwinds, right? And the last 40 seconds of this piece are absolute magic. I actually play it without breathing because it is so amazing. The way this composer wrote out how the music box slowly, tinkling, dies out. The rest he put in, the 8th rest, the 16th rest, the dashes, the dots, it's magic. The second piece is by a French composer named Lyadov. Lyadov is a Russian composer. The second one is by a French composer named Chabrier, Emmanuel Chabrier. And it's called a French dance. So he's French, and this was a French dance. It's very exuberant, and I play this with the music box because the music box is so delicate. This is really exuberant, really outgoing and boisterous and everything. So these are two gems, the music box by Russian composer Lyadov, and then the French dance by the French composer Chabrier. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Well, I hope you could hear the music box slow down, right? That's a magical piece. I only know of one other pianist that plays that piece. One other pianist. And I never knew it existed for 50 years. So, and after the concert, some people have come up to me and says, "Boy, I loved your concert, but my favorite piece was the music box." And I say, "Okay, I played a piece by Beethoven that's 10,000 notes, and I played the music box, which is 200 notes, and you like the 200 more than the 10." No, that's all right. Well, next I'm going to play something very different and special. I travel a lot. I was in France a couple of months ago. Before that, I was in Poland and Germany. And in April, I'm going back to Europe. I'm doing a large tour of concerts in Austria and the Czech Republic and Germany. And I'm going to play with an orchestra there, on tour with an orchestra. And the conductor is a believer. And I'm going to play a piece by Mozart written for 2 pianos and orchestra. So Mozart was the greatest genius in the history of anything. When he was 4 years old, he wrote his first piece. When he was 7 years old, he wrote his first symphony. Now, you know what you have to write for a symphony? You have to know how to write for a violin and a viola and a cello and a bass and a flute and an oboe and a clarinet and a bassoon and a trumpet and a I mean, what were you doing when you were 7? I was playing in the dirt with dinosaurs, and Mozart's writing for the Phoenix Symphony. And he wrote these pieces, and the people were just amazed because this is not like easy pieces. This, well, he's 7 years old. I mean, how difficult could it be? It was difficult. So Mozart had a great tour in France. He returned back to Salzburg, which was where he was born and his family was. His father Leopold, his sister. So he wrote this piece for 2 pianos and orchestra. So I am one of the pianists. The other pianist is a believer. And at these concerts, I'm giving my testimony. All these people come to the concert. They want me to give my testimony. So I have played this piece before, but you are the guinea pigs. So I asked Pastor Holcomb if he could put $50,000 in the budget this year to hire an orchestra, and he said, no, it wasn't approved. That's not true. Don't worry about it. You couldn't afford a 100-piece orchestra tonight? What? No. So there's an orchestra, there's another pianist, and I'm a pianist. So the piece is a long piece, but I'm only going to play one movement of it. It's the third movement, the last movement. So I'm not saying you have to, figure this out, but you'll hear this piece. It's a beautiful piece. He wrote it for his sister. Mozart played the first piano part. His sister played the second piano part. And you know who conducted the concert? Mozart's father. His father was a wonderful conductor. His name is Leopold. So Leopold Mozart conducted it. It was very popular. I've played this piece a number of times with some famous pianists, and it's again for 2 piano. And so if you want to hear the piece, you can go to YouTube, really, and just put in Mozart 2 piano concerto. 2 piano and orchestra. That's all you need to write. And you'll see there's many recordings of it. So I'm going to play it for you. This is the third movement. This is my part, which is the main part, the other pianist part of the 2 piano concerto by Mozart. And if the concert goes great in Europe, I'm going to say, well, you should thank the concert I had in Quartzsite. Yeah, you can clap for yourself. And they're going to say, where's Quartzsite? I'm going to say, don't worry about it. Thank you. Not bad for a 7-year-old. No, he was older than that. He was older than that. He was in his early 20s. But he was very, 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 very famous. Very famous. Well, I'd like to share with you my testimony and then play another big piece by Beethoven. And my testimony begins with my parents. My father was born in Eastern Europe in a country called Romania in 1905. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. At that time, the country was called Czechoslovakia, and she was born there in 1915. So my parents were 10 years difference in age. And they were both very religious Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews that adhere to the Jewish faith. They want to follow all the laws that God gave to the Jewish people through Moses in what Jewish people we refer to as the Torah. The Torah are the first 5 books of the Bible. The first 5 books of the Bible, the 5 books of Moses. And all of Jewish theology and practice come from the Torah. Rabbis spent literally their whole lives studying every jot and tittle of the Torah. Every word, every phrase, every revelation. And so my parents left Europe in 1940 because of one person. And his name was Adolf Hitler. In 1940, my father was 35. My mother was 25. They would have been sent to a concentration camp and immediately exterminated. Or they were sent to a labor camp, being young is what I mean. They were not seniors, 60s, 70s, but they were young. And people don't know this, but once you got to a labor camp, the minute you became sick, they killed you. There was no time for you to get well. That's it. So my parents had to do what a lot of Jews did, which is get out of Europe. You had to get out of Europe. And 11 months after my father left Romania, the Nazis came to his town. They came to his house. They murdered his parents, my grandparents. They took a sister to a concentration camp and never heard from again. So like a lot of Jews, many people don't know this historically, but a lot of Jews ended up in South America. I've done many concerts, about 5 tours of concerts in Brazil, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Jewish people in Argentina, Brazil, and Chile because of escaping the Second World War. My parents ended up in a small country on the equator called Ecuador. And they ended up in the capital called Quito, Ecuador. And they were there from 1940 to 1950. My brother was born there. My sister was born there. My mother was pregnant with me in the spring of 1950. So this is years after the war. And my father wanted to bring his family to the United States. He filled out all this paperwork. He got permission, and they came through New York City. And I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. So I'm 75. And I was raised in a very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish. And I was instilled with all my Jewish heritage. I went to public school during the day, and then after that, I went to school in the synagogue. So there are Catholic schools, Baptist schools. There are not many Jewish schools, but there are some. And we had a huge synagogue, and we could afford what was called a yeshiva. A yeshiva is where you study education in developing rabbis. And so I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week for 8 years. I went to school till 3 o'clock, and from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, I was in the synagogue 5 days a week for 8 years. I started when I was 8 until I was 16. I learned Hebrew. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned hundreds of prayers. And all my friends were Jewish, and all my relatives were Jewish. So I don't say this to be funny, but this was not a course, a 2-week course on how to be a good Jew. No. If you did this, this was a commitment for your life. This was a commitment for your life. I remember I'd pray in the morning for a half an hour, and then I went to school, and something unusual happened. I was 12 years old. I remember I realized I began to develop a very foul mouth. I could curse very easily. I could lie to my teachers, not a lot, but enough. I could lie to my parents, not a lot, but enough. I was very religious in the synagogue, and these prayers meant a lot to me. And it was easy to be religious. And then an hour later, I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy. It was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and easy for me to be a sinner when I wanted to. I was good at both. Pretty sad. Then I went to Juilliard, and there I met 3 students who called themselves born-again Christians. Well, I had no idea what that meant. I mean, I never even heard that term. But there was something about these students. I saw one of them in the cafeteria eating lunch by himself. I saw another one taking a break from practicing. I was taking a break in the hallway from practicing, and I saw him in the other hall. And whenever I saw these students, they were always reading the Bible. The Bible. And I thought, why are they reading the Bible? This is not a school of religion, it's a school of music. These were music students, and they were very talented. And whenever they got together, all they did was talk about Jesus. Jesus did this, and Jesus said this. And why did Jesus say this? What did Jesus mean when he said this? What did Jesus mean when he did this? Why did Jesus... I mean, they never talked about church. They never talked about the C word, Christianity. It was always Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. In Hebrew, Yeshua. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew, and they asked me 2 questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament. And I told them, nope, not a word. I was told the New Testament was not a Jewish book. It wasn't for the Jews. You would never find a New Testament in our home. I had no idea what was in it. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't know of one word that was in this book called the New Testament. They asked me if I ever thought if Jesus could be the Jewish Messiah. The Jews are waiting the Messiah. In Hebrew, it's called Mashiach. And I said, Jesus is not the salvation for Jewish people. But I was very moral, very religious. I didn't want to do anything to shame my parents. My parents, literally, almost died for me. They sacrificed for me. So I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like. Never been drunk. And my thinking was, if I drink, I might get drunk. And if I get drunk, I might do something stupid and shame my parents. Not worth it. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War. Some of you relate to that. And that was the height of this group called the hippies. Remember the hippies? The hippies was all about drugs and sex, and maybe you'll find some happiness. Well, I'm going to tell you, New York City was full of hippies. And at every corner, you can get all the drugs you wanted in the late 60s and early 70s. It's not what drugs you wanted, how much drugs you wanted. I never took it. And you know why? I thought if I take drugs and I get spooked in my mind, I might do something stupid and shame my parents. Not worth it. Never had sex before marriage. So even though I was so moral on the outside, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, my friend, I'm going to tell you I was very, very, very immoral. Immoral. You know where? Right here. Listen. I knew I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many, many Jewish things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral. I was very religious, but I was not changed. I was the same. Foul-mouthed, dirty-minded, self-centered, egotistical person at 20 years old, 18 years old, 16, 14. Nothing changed about me except I was older. The same sins, the same issues, the same difficulties. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'm going to read this book, the New Testament. Now, let me tell you something. That was a big step for a Jew to read the New Testament. And I didn't want to talk to a rabbi or priest or minister. I don't want anyone to tell me what I'm reading. Now, when I was a student at Juilliard, as I told you, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, that's not a lie or an exaggeration. I did not sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day. Every day. I never left Juilliard until I practiced for 10 full hours every day. And when I started to read the New Testament, my whole life came to a stop. I was absolutely shocked when I read this book. For the first time in my life since I started piano as a little boy, I completely stopped practicing. That never happened. These friends gave me a little pocket New Testament. You know, it just fits in your pocket, little thing. And they said, well, Sam, if you read this book, start in this book called The Gospel of John. I never heard about it. Never heard of it. But I got it out. I looked. Wow, there it is. The Gospel of John. Sure enough. Well, let me tell you what I read. Here was a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Wow. You know, the first thing that came to my mind was the first book of the Bible. In Hebrew, it's called Bereshis, the beginning. And God said, let there be light. And every Jew is taught that God is light. Every Jewish holiday begins with the lighting of a candle every Sabbath. Every Passover, the first thing you do is light, because God is light, and we're inviting him. Every synagogue, in every sanctuary of every synagogue has a light, the eternal light. The light's not God, it's the symbol of the reality of God who is light. And now this man says, by the way, I'm that light. Here's a man who said, I am the bread of life. Here's a man who said, nobody comes to God, my Father, except through me. Here's a man that says, if you have the Son of God, you have life. If you don't have the Son of God, you don't have life. Can you repeat that again? If you don't have the Son of God, you don't have life. What idiots thought that up? You see how I was shocked. I had no idea that this person made these statements. Moses never said he was the light of the world. You know who Moses is to the Jewish people? Abraham, Father Abraham. Every Jewish prayer begins with Abraham. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, the King of the universe, Elohei Avraham, the God of Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, the God of Isaac, Elohei Yaakov, the God of Jacob. Every Jewish prayer begins with that. Abraham never said he was the bread of life. Abraham never said he was the only way to God. I mean, I said, this is beyond the pale. I'm going to throw away this book. I'm going to go practice. And then I said to myself, Sam, if this person Jesus is who he says he is, let me repeat that again. If this person Jesus is who he says he is, who are you, Jesus? You want to know who I am, Sam? I am the light of the world. And if you don't believe it, I'm still the light of the world. And if nobody believed it, I'm still the light of the world. If he is who he says he is, I may be making the biggest mistake of my life throwing this book away. I better listen to this person. And then Jesus said he came for sinners. I was not a sinner. I was very moral and religious. I spent my whole life looking good for God. I was on God's side. But Jesus said he came to bring forgiveness, and he said he came to change us on the inside. You know what he called it? A new heart, a new birth, a new life, a spiritual heart, a spiritual birth, a spiritual life. Well, I've played concerts in 62 different countries. I think I've played in every country in Asia except North Korea. I've played all through Europe. I've played in parts of Africa, a lot of in South America. I've given 28 concerts in communist Cuba. I went to Cuba when you couldn't get to Cuba. And you know how I got into Cuba? Because they wanted me to come and play classical music. They wanted it to be a cultural enlightenment for the Cuban people. And the agreement was, I'll play my concert, but I have 15 minutes to share my story of my faith and personal faith in Jesus Christ. And they agreed. I gave 28 testimonies in 28 concerts in all the public concerts I gave, as long as I gave it at the concert and not in the park or outside. And let me tell you what I've learned. My friend, I don't care if your skin color is green or purple or pink or black or white. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what culture you're from. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Communist Party, Labor Party. Because this is the reality in the world. You know what the reality in the world is? Every person in this world, which is now 8 billion, and every person in this room, we are experts at hiding things. Hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? He hid. He hid. And God had to say, where are you? Do you realize that the kernel of every news broadcast, 10 billion news broadcasts that you will hear, is the same issue? Who is hiding what? You can hide things from your husband, from your wife, from your friends, from your children. Your children can hide things from you. You can hide things from someone at work. But let me tell you the truth. Nobody hides anything from this Jesus. Nobody. And even though I was so moral and so religious, please listen to me carefully, I thought I was clever enough with my tongue and crafty enough with my mind that I thought I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, 54 years ago, for the first time, I prayed to Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rotman. And Jesus, I want you to take over my life. It's very simple. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told him the lies I said. I told him the immoral thoughts I had. I told him the curse words I said. I hid nothing from Jesus. You know something? You don't need to hide anything from Jesus because you're not hiding anything. And I made up no excuses. You know, you can come to the person of Jesus Christ and you don't need to give him an excuse for anything you've ever done in your life. In fact, if you give him an excuse, you're complicating it. You don't need an excuse. You need to just tell him and confess it and repent and get new life and forgiveness. It was a long prayer. I finished praying. I opened up my eyes. And instantly, in a billionth of a second, immediately, I knew that Jesus Christ had completely changed me on the inside. I'm telling you, listen, I was shocked I stopped cursing. Immediately, he cleaned my mouth. That moment. And I remember I couldn't form a curse word with my lips if I wanted to. I had a dirty, filthy mind, and he cleaned it. That moment, 54 years ago. And I thanked him, and I thanked him, and I thanked him. And the next morning I woke up, and I went to Juilliard, and I went to every Jewish friend of mine. And I did. Every Jewish friend of mine. And I told them I have been transformed by the Messiah. And his name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. I've played over 3,400 concerts, and I can tell you that all of my concerts are nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life was to give my life to Jesus Christ. Music is not the most important thing in my life. Jesus Christ is. Listen, my friend, only Jesus Christ can transform your heart. Listen, your wife can't change you. Your husband can't change you. Your children cannot change you. The church cannot change you. The government cannot change you. And let me tell you something. You cannot change you. You know who the hardest person to live with is? Yourself. But this is the miracle in the world. Remember? The reality is that everyone's good at hiding things. The miracle in the world is that Jesus Christ actually changes and transforms a human heart. My friend, that's mind-boggling. That's mind-boggling. And he's done it to hundreds of millions of people in 2,000 years, and I'm one of them, little me. I'm one. You know why I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. If I was born in Egypt, I would be a Muslim, and you would be a Muslim. If I was born in India, I've done concerts. If you were born in India, you would be a Hindu. If you were born in Thailand, you'd be a Buddhist. You realize that 99% of the world is born into a religion. Why are you Jewish? Why are you a Muslim? Why are you a Mormon? Why are you Catholic? Why are you Buddhist? You were born into it. That's why you need another birth. You've been born into a religion. Now you need a spiritual birth to know God personally. Can I just say something on the side, and I'll be done here in 2 minutes? You know what you'll see in every synagogue in the world? You go to any synagogue, Reformed, Orthodox, Conservatives, Chabad, every synagogue has the same symbol in it. You know what it is? The 10 Commandments. Every synagogue has. That's the law that God gave to the world through Moses to the Jewish people and to the world. You'll see it. That every synagogue has it. The 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments. You know what's the first thing you see when you walk into a church? You know what I call it? Forgiveness. Amen is right. Every time you look at this cross, every time you see someone wearing a cross, every time you drive down a street and you see a church with a cross, God's telling you, why don't you come to me and be forgiven? I've made a way to forgive you. Why don't you start a whole new life? Start a whole new life and be forgiven. Salvation is not what you will do for Jesus Christ. Salvation is everything that Jesus Christ has done for you. That's salvation. And I play the piano for him. I realize he gave me the ears to hear the music, the fingers to play the music, the mind to learn the music, the heart to love the music. You know that Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. You know that? I know it sounds very cute, but it's very real. And every time I give a concert in a church or a big hall in Europe or with an orchestra, he's in the front row. And every time I sit down to play, he always says the same thing to me. He says, Sam, I'm really looking forward to hearing you play for me tonight. Listen, my friend, listen. If I could look into your eyes, young person, senior, I'm 3 inches from your nose, I would tell you with every fiber of my being, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. Listen, my friend, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. He is no joke. He's not a curse word. He's not hocus pocus magic. He's not even a nice Christmas story. He is the life and the light of the world. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is in Jesus Christ. My friend, my family for millennium, over 1,000 years, were Orthodox Jews in Eastern Europe. 1,000 years. I had a million excuses. Your past can disappoint you. People can disappoint you. They're not worth it. He's worth it. And you can say like I did, young person. Tell him your name. Jesus, my name is. Tell him your name. And I want you to take over my life. And he will. And I want you to forgive me. And he will. And I want you to help me and guide me and be with me, my friend. He will, he will, he will. And you do that, you'll experience the salvation of your soul. Music gives me a lot of happiness, but not one note of music will change me. I'll play 40,000 notes tonight. Really, I'm not being exaggerated. 40,000 notes, but not one note will change me. Jesus changed me, transformed me, gave me a new life. My friend, it's worth living for him. It is worth living for him. Last piece. This is by Beethoven. You've all heard this piece. It's a very famous piece called the Turkish March. Beethoven wrote this, and you'll hear the march, and then you hear these 6 little variations. These little variations, each one is a development of the march, and then at the end you'll hear the march again. So it's the last piece, the march, the variations, the march by Beethoven. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated just for a moment. Just before the pastor comes up, have a seat. Anybody have a question you'd like to ask me? My life, my music, my social security number, or no? Anybody? Yes, ma'am. How do I compensate for different pianos? Yep. Well, let me say to begin with, I play on any piano because Jesus played on any piano for me. So my point is that I've played pianos that ought to be firewood, but I don't say that. So that's why I practice 7 hours a day. That's why I want to play the best I can for Jesus. Let me ask you this. If a football team is going to play and it's snowing, do they still play the game? They do. What if it's raining? Do they still play the game? Yes. That's what it's like playing the piano. You have to realize that this piano is not great. This piano doesn't do this, doesn't do this. This piano, this is a good piano. So the point is that's why I practice hard, because I know that I'm going to have to play on a different instrument every time I play. And so I want to play at the highest level. I've even played on electronic pianos. I played in some concerts in Cuba. They didn't have a piano. They had only an electronic keyboard. So I played on it. And so that's the thing. You have to just be ready. Whether it's 20 below zero, you still play the football game. You know what I'm saying? That's how you're a professional. You still have to do it to the highest of your excellence, regardless of the weather or the piano. Yeah. Someone else, any question? Yes, sir. Yeah. I memorize almost everything. With this piece, this two piano, it's not uncommon to have the music up there, because it's not. Now, if it was just me, I wouldn't use music. I memorize everything. So I've learned 1,100 pieces. That's a lot of music. And the thing is that I memorize everything. But on this piece, the other pianist is going to use music. I don't want to show her up that she's using and I'm not using. So that's why. No, but you're right. I hardly look at the notes because I know the piece by memory. Yeah, sure. Any other question? Yes, ma'am. Well, I speak German fluently because that was the language in our home. I can speak Hebrew. I've lost a lot. I've been enough to Russia and France that I can speak somewhat that. My father spoke 8 languages. I'm not exact, 8, very well. And I told my father, why did you learn 8 languages? He said, every 3 years a new country took us over. First we were Romanian, then the Russians took us over, then the Prussians took us over, then the Germans took us over. You see what I'm saying? And then he lived in South America, so he spoke Spanish fluently, right? And then he came to America and he spoke English. And you know what he says? He said, I learned English watching I Love Lucy. And of course, my father was 45 when he came to America. Now, he was born in 1905. My mother and father had very strong accents. My grandkids had, my daughter spoke to my mother, and she hangs up and says, she's like 8 or 9 years old. She says, Dad, I didn't understand a word Grandma said because of her accent. They had very strong European accents, because they were 45 and 35. So when I go to Germany and Austria and stuff, I get along very well because I know the language and stuff. This morning I played a concert and there was a woman there from Russia and we were speaking Russian together. Yeah, Olga was her name. That's like Mary. Anyone else? Okay, yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, that's usually the first or second question. How did my family respond? So I went and shared with my parents, and I knew it'd be very difficult. My father's parents died because they were Jewish, and now this son believes in this Jesus. So my father asked me to leave the house, and he said 3 things to me. You're no longer my son. I never want to hear from you again, and as far as I'm concerned, you're dead. So I knew it'd be difficult. I knew. I didn't know how difficult. I didn't hear from my parents for a number of years. I got married to my wife. She's a believer. We've been married 52 years. They did not come to the wedding. We have 3 children. I wanted them to enjoy the grandchildren. I was not going to say a word. I knew if I said a word, it would be disastrous. But it was too difficult for my father. My children saw their grandparents, my parents, maybe 3 times in 25 years. Very sad. In 1995, my father was 89, almost 90, and he became ill. I wanted to visit him in the hospital, and he refused to see me. He died 4 days later, and at his request, he did not want me at the funeral, which I expected that. So I live in the Phoenix area in Mesa, Arizona. My mother lived in Scottsdale. Now, if you know anything about Scottsdale, that's where the Jews live. Most of the synagogues in Phoenix are in Scottsdale. In fact, you all know of a very famous person who lived 9 years in Scottsdale from the age of 8 to 17. And his name was Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg, his first movies are in the parks, Papago Park in Scottsdale, Arizona. He grew up in the Jewish community in Arizona. And the last year of high school, his father got a job in California, and they moved, and now you know the rest of the story. So my point is that I reached out to my mother. 2 things about my mother. My mother loved classical music. I'm in classical music because of my mother. And my mother's family all escaped the Nazis. Nobody in her family died. My father lost his whole family. So with that, my passing of my father, I had a great relationship with my mother. She loved my wife, loved our 3 kids. Every 6 months, I gave a personal concert just for my mother, making up for 25 years of no concerts and no relationship. I began to share with my mother. She went to synagogue every Sabbath, and I always asked her, what did the rabbi talk about, to bring up spiritual things. I began to read to her the New Testament, and on February the 12th, 2007, so this is 12 years later, from 1995 to February of 2007, my 91-year-old mother came to faith in Jesus Christ, the Messiah. It was absolutely mind-boggling. And she was changed. She was changed. And she's gone to be with the Lord, of course, now. And I spoke at her funeral. I said, Mother, you're now in the bosom of Father Abraham. And that's what Jesus said in Matthew's gospel, written to Jews, because that's what heaven is. So I knew it'd be very, very difficult. I mean, very traumatic for my family, especially my father. But it was the salvation. After 36 years, I prayed for my mother 36 years. And she came to faith and knowing the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Amen. Let me just mention, if you have more questions, I can talk to you afterwards. I have a table in the lobby. On the table, there are some recordings. One is all Beethoven. That's my favorite recording. It was almost nominated for a Grammy in 2004 when I recorded it because I heard from the Grammy Association. Another recording, and there's 5 major pieces. The Moonlight Sonata, the Pathétique, these are major colossal works of Beethoven. Another recording is 16 pieces by Debussy. Debussy is delicate. It has the famous piece, Clair de Lune, the light of the moon. You listen to that recording and all the stress goes out of you. You will be a puddle of water in the living room. Then there's a recording of 6 composers, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. So that's a little of everything, 250 years of music. Then there's a DVD of my whole testimony. It was produced by a group called Jews for Jesus. And it's everything I shared here with me playing, but it's mostly speaking. And again, it's a DVD. You don't listen to it, you watch it like a movie. It's a documentary. All the recordings are $15. There's no tax. The autograph is free. About 20 years ago, I gave a concert in Green Valley, and I said, tonight the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. And a man came up to me and said, I'd like a CD with no autograph. I won't tell you what I said to him. And then, a number of years ago, I gave my concert in Washington State, and there was a lady who heard my concert and was blessed by it, and she owns a Christian publishing company. They publish not the whole Bible, but books of the Bible. And she got 8 of my concerts, recordings that are on YouTube and stuff, and she put together every word that I've said in these 8 testimonies. And so she has published the Gospel of John, that's what brought me to Christ, with the Christian testimony of Sam Rotman. And they're free. She's probably published 50,000 of these. She sends them all over the world, all over the country. She never charges me a dime for postage or anything. So I get them. So if you'd like a copy of my testimony, she only says that if you take more than 1 or 2 copies, the 3rd copy, could you give it to somebody that needs to know the Lord? So she wants the word to spread out. But the books are there. Take whatever books you'd like. My testimony, the CDs are there. And I'll be in the back, and I hope it was a blessing. Thank you for coming. I enjoy coming to Quartzsite. Thank you. Pastor, come on up. Amen.